So, hello and welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast, guys. It is me, Pascal Steve. On the other end, it is Steve Hall. After a short hiatus, not for you guys, but for us at least, right? We've recorded like 2 weeks ago, and here we are back again. Lots of things probably happened in the meanwhile. So, I guess where to start, Steve? How are you, I think, is an appropriate way to start.
Yeah, you were saying lots of things happened, and I'm like, man, so little really happens in my life. The most exciting thing that probably happened, and this is how little happened. Well, I suppose actually, wait. I had my birthday, didn't I? I suppose that happened.
Not only that, I can think of something else as well. Exactly.
The finger gate, that wasn't exciting, so my finger got infected.
Finger gate, exactly.
Which is just, oh man, it's just ridiculous. I just don't garden without gloves. That's all I can say. I just didn't even think that was something that happened, was like fingers got infected from gardening, but they do.
What Steve isn't telling the you guys, the listener and the audience, is it was Steve's birthday, and what he really likes to do is being on Grindr and then sticking his finger inside the butt of a lot of people. And of course, it was only a matter of time that it will get infected at some point with nasty asshole bacteria.
Oh God.
That wasn't what happened, Steve. No.
It was maybe it was like some animal rubbed their asshole down there. Sometimes Ada does this, is like scooting along the ground, just like if they got an itchy butt, and it's the funniest thing ever.
It is. I've seen it on Kayo as well already, but it was often when there was still a little bit of poop hanging down their asshole. Oh, sorry for the language here. It was hanging down, and he was trying to get rid of it.
The number of times where, oh man, Ada is, just to go down this route, why not? She would sometimes.
We are already at the topic.
I know, she eats the weirdest, like she will eat anything basically, but she has eaten like vines and stuff, and they've been like whole coming out, and I've had to like pull it with the poo bag out of her butt, and it's just like coming out, and she's also eaten like string and things, and I'm just like, she's pooing and it's just not coming out, so I have to like pull it out of her butt, and it's just like, this God, that must feel horrible.
Just recently there was a dead baby bird that Kayo ate, and then on the same day I think it was, he was already pooping out a couple of parts of then the baby bird, which wasn't pleasant to look at.
I'll end it with this one. I said Ada eats anything. She was sick in the night and like puked up, and Charlotte was really concerned because she was like, it looks like she's, I don't know, puked up an organ or something, and it was some other dog's poo came out of her mouth. Yeah. Because she'd eaten it.
That's a common thing, yeah. No, absolutely. It's so weird because one night I was waking up to a weird sound, and that was kind of the vomiting sound of Kayo.
Yeah.
I was just like, waking Katie up, and I'm like, Kayo's puking at the moment. She goes, it's fine, he's going to eat it anyway. And he did. So
that's Charlotte's the one who's like very concerned all the time with anything, like if Ava is heaving or something, whereas I'm just like, and I haven't even had dogs before, I'm just like, I think it's because I am here all the time with her, so I hear her making all these noises and being weird or whatever, and I'm just like, she's fine. She'll get over it.
Enough about poop talk or dogs, and also eating your own vomit and all that kind of stuff. So how's the finger doing right now?
So yeah, I guess I can talk a little bit about, so my birthday was on, what was it, like the Thursday or whatever, and I did the gardening on the weekend, and I just thought I'd bruised it on something and damaged it because it was a little bit inflamed, but then it was just obvious, it was like hot and like burning, and I was like, man, I'm gonna have to go to A&E. So ended up on my birthday that evening going to A&E when Charlotte had planned like dinner and like some activities, so that ended up getting pushed to the next day, and I just got antibiotics basically. But the antibiotics actually weren't solving the issue, so I didn't want to have to go back to the A&E for them to like burst it and get the pus out or anything. So as you do, we've got the internet now, so we're all our own doctor. So I just looked up some pretty innovative way of trying to relieve the pus, and so ended up doing that, and it was actually super simple. I just had to kind of lift the skin off. It sounds way worse than it is as well. Like lift the skin off the nail, and then the pus could kind of come out through that gap. And that was totally easy. Not much came out, but it seemed to relieve the issue. And now the finger is pretty much back to absolute normal. So yeah, it took longer than I expected, but it solved it.
There you go. You have your medical, exactly. You have your medical degree now.
But thankfully it happened on the Thursday, which was, it happened when it got worse. It was on the Thursday, which was the last day of that training meso. And so Friday I was off. Weekend it was like start of deload. So it actually happened at like a really prime time in terms of like bodybuilding training and everything. Because not that it was actually, by the time it was at its worst, it wasn't great to like use that hand to grip things. It was just very uncomfortable. So it was pretty ideal. And I just took the weekend off the gym completely.
Yeah. No, I think it's a necessary evil, but also a wise decision of then also getting it checked out and stuff like this. Because funny enough, and this is something that we're going to talk about as well, kind of a similar thing happened to Katie now. She was at the hospital for several days now because she had an infection inside of her ear. And that needed to be relieved as well. And all of the fluid that has been built up needed to be fighted off with antibiotics. And I wasn't even sure whether she needs to undergo surgery inside her ears because she was undergoing surgery just to cut it open. But also there, I needed then to take care of all of the obligations and tasks that she normally takes care of. So taking care of two small kids at home, taking care of the dog. And this is double the amount of workload because I was on holiday. Unfortunately, not as you, where it was like at the beginning of the holiday that it started, but at the end of the holiday, where then I needed to catch up on work. So as a self-employee, you never really have time off. It's more like you are postponing it or delaying kind of the entire work, or you're doing a little bit of work in advance. And it was right at the time where I wanted to go back to work, wanted to start my mesocycle again, and then I needed to adapt. And I think sometimes it's important to go through these times, as unfortunate as it may sound, but this makes you realize how privileged we are. It makes you appreciate also the flexibility and the amount of time that you still have most of the time. And it makes you appreciate that it can always be worse, and you are adapting to that scenario very quickly. At first, I was very stressed out, and then a couple of days later, I was already in the groove of things because you've managed to adapt to it. You figured out a groove that kind of fits your needs and makes it so that you are still capable of taking care of everything. And sometimes it's very important to go through these things, and you needed to adapt with your finger as well.
Yeah, mine was thankfully nowhere near on the level of adaptation
it could have gotten much worse if you're not really taking care of it properly.
For sure, yeah. So weird, actually, that there's been so many of these sort of occasions in our close circle, because my best friend, I just messaged him the other day being like, oh, how are you doing? Be good for a catch up. And I told him about my finger like over the weekend, because obviously it was around my birthday, so we were kind of interacting. He was like, oh, that sounds awful, I'd hate to be on A&E like in an evening and whatever. And he's just got back from being in hospital because he had sepsis and he got pneumonia. Yeah. Oh, shit. Because he had an infection and didn't get it checked even after I told him about mine. They were like, if you left it like another day or so, you'd be at risk of losing your life. It's just like crazy. So if anyone's listening and you've got a swelling somewhere or you think something's infected, just always go get it checked.
Yeah. And it's like the one time that was back in, what was it? I think it was 2022, right? Where I was having sepsis. I was feeling terrible, right? And I was lucky because it's like you said, with each and every single hour that passes, your risk of passing away is, I think, increasing by 10% or so. And that's just by an hour, each and every single hour that passes. So don't take these things seriously, like honestly.
Yeah, for sure. And it's sometimes like the body is incredible in so many ways and it's very adaptable, but like just an infection, how dangerous that can be. Like you can just be unlucky and just like it can just happen. And so it reminds you how fragile the body is, and also how I think for you, like in your situation particularly, like just how quickly like your stability can be taken away from you if just something changes in your life. So you just have to remember that, like, to be adaptable and to not panic in those situations, even in short term, it's uncomfortable.
That always makes you realize how freaking amazing our medical, not the system, but medication, the medical field already is, and how advanced it is. That's why people are getting older and older and older already. I was just telling you the other day about that surgeon that, what was it again? The lung surgeon who was saying that his oldest patient was around 107 years old or something like this, which is crazy. And just also there, you would easily have died like a couple of centuries ago, right? Easily. With those kind of small things, just because you kind of pricked your finger in the garden. And then you're dead. And nowadays, it's just like going to see a doctor and you should be fine.
And again, to talk about like how like lucky we are to be living in this day and age, it was literally for me, like I called 111, which is like our, like, I don't know, emergency like helpline or whatever, and you talk to them. They can book you in an appointment with like the out of hours GP. And then I get an appointment that evening. I Uber over there because thankfully I can afford an Uber, and there's Uber available in London, so I can get over there efficiently. It's not hassle. Then obviously get one back. And then on the way back, Charlotte literally was ordering us a takeaway so that there was food available. It's just like, man, that's this is the time to be alive, right? You can just, and actually even on my birthday, Pascal, I was just sat at my desk and I was like, oh, it's my birthday. I really fancy a Monster. And I went on Deliveroo and I was like, man, I can order a Monster for like £1.60. I can order a few other groceries and get it delivered to my door, ice cold. And it came in like 20 minutes. And I was just like, what a time to be alive.
Funny enough, because it's also what Katie and I just talked about recently, where what's the chance of you living in a time where we are that technologically advanced, and also being in a lucky position where you are in a very nice and secure environment? Man, you have already won the lottery. Honestly, everyone who's listening to this podcast, yes, you may have some shitty situations in your life and all that kind of stuff, but man, if we are really honest, we have already won the jackpot or lottery.
The only counterpoint to this now is I was referred to a podcast by one of my clients, and he was like, this podcast made me feel depressed. And I was like, I don't know if I want to listen to it. You may have already heard it. You've probably heard similar podcasts, and maybe many of the listeners have too. It was by Stephen Bartlett. He had like an ex-Google like AI representative or something on there, and he was essentially just like doomsday AI, essentially, not iRobot style.
There are other people such as Elijah, I can't really recall his name. He's one of the vocal ones who has also been in the AI field since a very long time, who's been very vocal about it, and who has been like, I would love to have hope, but I can't.
Yeah.
Right? Something like this, where you're just like swallowing. If someone like this is actually then saying something like that, you're just like, man, we're fucked. But at the same time, people have always made some doomsday predictions in the past. I could very well see that AI may be something that is incomprehensible for people like us, right? And we can't even fathom the danger that lies within it. But if it's doomsday, there's nothing we can do, I think, right? It's then up to other people, I think, to probably do something about it. And then the question arises of like, are we maybe already, or have we already accelerated it to the extent that it can't be stopped anymore, right? All that kind of stuff. And for us, we have no idea, right? It's like, we're listening to that, we are susceptible to it, but at the same time, all we can do is kind of hope that history repeats itself, that people were wrong about doomsday scenarios, and that humankind always figures out a way. Because so far we have.
Yeah, the thing that made me a little skeptical, at least, of some of what he was saying was he was very certain that it was going to be negative for lots of people, that they'd lose their jobs. But he didn't really talk about the upside of people maybe being able to do other jobs. I don't know. And I don't know. That just feels like that was like a hole that could have been covered that wasn't. And so, because I don't know, that's the way I always look at like these technological advancements. People are like, oh, I'm going to lose my jobs, but it opens up other opportunities. So
it has
like,
always been like this. Always. People are only being able to see the negative consequences or imagining the negative consequences while not being able to see the potential effects of what's to come. Because how? How should we do it?
Yeah.
Because otherwise we would just invent something if we could see in the future. Like, who would have thought that the smartphone back in 2000, I think 6 it was, when this came out, will change the entire world, right? And there were so many jobs created just because of a smartphone. So many jobs. And no one ever thought that will come to fruition. I don't know, of course, it will replace then other jobs and make them redundant. But I also think that new opportunities arise with new technological advancements, and things will adapt, things will evolve, and some things will, of course, not be the way that they are right now. But I mean, right now we are in a position, just from a statistical perspective, where people are working the most that they've ever have in their entire lives, and in itself, that doesn't really make any kind of sense, because you would have assumed that due to technological advancement, it has always been created to save time, to make things more efficient. But because of that, new things were able. It's kind of like the adjacent possible. Once you cross a certain threshold, new opportunities arise in front of you, which weren't really possible or you couldn't comprehend before that.
This is great because I can relate it back to bodybuilding a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I just recently made this post where I was like, I think a lot of us are dead. A lot of people just have this mentality of like harder is better, more is better. Like we shouldn't make tasks easier for ourselves. And I'm always like, it's not a case of making things. It's not trying to make it easier for the sake of making it easier. It's trying to make it more efficient. And so, like you said there, once you can make what your bodybuilding more efficient, more like easier, quote unquote, you can have the opportunity to do more other things that can propel your progress further. Like if you're, I don't know, eating by the clock and it's so challenging to like time your meals precisely, and you have to like, I don't know, go out of your way to try and eat your specific foods off your meal plan, and like that can create roadblocks to being able to advance in other areas, or to have lower stress that could propel your recovery and therefore your training and things like this. So there's a great analogy towards that, because I agree with you in terms of like, that's what technology is allowing us to do, is to be able to be even better.
100%, and we can even extrapolate a little bit more and take a look at physicians, where it's like, okay, it's so hard to discover something that you don't even know exists and what it looks like. You don't know what it is that you're looking for, right? And this could also very well be the case for things that are still happening in the human body that we haven't discovered because we don't know what we are looking for. So maybe there are things happening on such a microscopic level that we don't have the technology yet to then detect it, or we have never really thought about looking for this. And that is why it has been unnoticed so far. And perhaps then we are finding things that makes us understand things a little bit easier, right? And this is kind of finishing the piece of the puzzle, so to speak.
It's funny. This relates to, I just remember him saying this on the podcast, like ChatGPT has an IQ of like 150 at the moment. Einstein was like around 160. The smartest man in the world is around 200. And it was like, at the rate it's going, it in a short time is going to be in the thousands of IQ. And then you just imagine someone with thousands of IQ, like what holes could they open up to understand and bring together and that sort of thing. And that's where those sort of things, like you mentioned, those discoveries could come about, which could be a really positive thing.
Exactly. And just think about it. If someone, a researcher, can make use of that IQ and a machinery like this, man, maybe there are just so many things that have been unnoticed before or haven't really thought about and all that kind of stuff. So I think that it could even accelerate technological and medical advancements as well, to an extent that is then causing a utopia instead of a dystopia.
It always brings me back to like WALL-E, where they're all fat sitting in these chairs, just like mobility scooters moving around.
It's the
The
best.
robots just do all the work for them.
It's
So
amazing.
to come to I guess more our sort of niche area topics. How is your training going? You're back into the gym, right? You've done your deload,
Yes.
still gaining weight.
I've started now my Metabolite block, and I want to elaborate a little bit more on this one because I've already now a couple of sessions in realized a couple of things for myself. First and foremost, I'm getting old. It's something that is not a secret anymore, something that I've talked about a couple of times, and I'm just a wreck since a long time. And my lower body is actually, once again, is not my teammate anymore to some extent. I sometimes feel that it is kind of fighting against me, or we are not kind of vibing as much anymore. So I need to make some modifications and adjustments, and I still haven't really figured out what kind of adjustments I need to make, unfortunately. One more thing is I have a new pair of weightlifting shoes, Steve. I have the Reebok Legacy 3. They just came out, and I actually discovered a 30% off discount code for then those shoes. So instead of paying 200 for them, I paid only 140. And we've talked about it in the past with lifting gadgets. I think that lifting straps and also weightlifting shoes is something that is absolutely worth it. And if you then kind of get a very good pair of weightlifting shoes for 140, break it down to like on an annual basis, and it is a laughable amount of money that you're spending on it for the amount that you're getting in return. Because my old Adidas, they lasted me for like 10 years, and I was wearing them not on the streets, such as other people, but quite regularly, right? And I could have still made use of them for a little bit longer. But there were a couple of pieces that were already kind of broken. That being said, I had one session with those, and you can already tell the difference between those shoes. I think that since my Adidas, because they were already quite an old pair, I think it was the Adidas, what was it again?
There's like the power
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, so, something like this.
Adi Powers?
Adi Powers, exactly. The Adi Power, I think 1 or 2 even, like from 13, 14 years ago. And ever since then, a lot has happened because of CrossFit, the popularity of physique sports. There went a lot of money into that kind of niche, and you can really tell the difference in how the shoes are being made and how, and they have like a pump function as well to then snug the shoes around your feet even more so. They have a little bit higher of a heel height. They are a little bit more stable and all that kind of stuff, which can be felt even in the first session already. And that was great. That was fun to test out some new shoes. And I ordered the first pair a little bit too big, unfortunately. And I needed to send them back because with weightlifting shoes, you want to have them really snug. It shouldn't feel uncomfortable, but at the same time, you shouldn't be able to walk in them or last in them for a very long time. It should really just like represent a stable foot instead of sliding in and out of the shoe or something like this. And that's why I then needed to send it back. And then it arrived again with a new shoe right before the first workout, which was great. And yeah, I don't know if you want to actually touch on that one first before we're then delving into more about the Metabolite block.
You're just tempting me to replace my ones.
They are old, right?
Yeah, mine, I think at the time we got weightlifting shoes, it was kind of like specific brands that did like niche powerlifting shoes, or it was Adidas or Nike. You either get the Nike Romaleos or the Adi Powers. Adi Powers if you have a slightly narrower foot, Romaleos maybe if you have a wider foot.
Yeah.
That was like what I remember it being, and I was like jumping between the two. I didn't know which I was going to get, so I went Romaleos, the Romaleo 2s, which I've also had for just over a decade now. They're still holding up. Like there's actually no part of them that I'm like, I don't know, if I really clean them up and everything, they could almost, not brand new, but they wouldn't look particularly worn. But now you've mentioned it, and it makes sense that there would be improvements and stuff. I'm like, maybe because I like the look of. Again, it's mostly, I was like, if I get a new lifting shoe, the only reason I'm replacing it is based off looks, really. I didn't really think of there being any other reasons, but you mentioned a few things there that make sense that they would be improved.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask about the heel lift, because for us, like when we're like bodybuilding, we're looking for that high heel lift generally to allow us to sit deeper into those quad bias movements. Like it's nice to just have that, because I just use I put a heel lift in the squat shoe. I'd probably end up doing that if I got new ones anyway, but
I did it as well though, still, because of the leg press that we are having, being in such a shitty position, and I need that additional range of motion. That's why I still have that heel. What is it? So mine are made out of cork, because I didn't really want to go with the Versa lifts because they are freaking expensive. And mine were just like, I don't know, €9 over on Amazon, because there was already, prior to Versa lifts or Versa grips, orthopedic heels, wedges. Man, go with these ones. Like, honestly, you don't have to just spend 40 or 50 quid on something just because it says Rogue or something like Versa grips.
They've done well there. I think there's been a few gadgets like that in the gym where they already kind of existed, and then they just brand it as being gym-based. It's kind of like female-specific protein. It's like they can charge 10, 20% more just because now they've put the pink label on there or whatever.
Exactly.
Kind of crazy.
No,
but
absolutely.
I used the old Metcons used to come with a heel lift, and they just came with a plastic heel lift that you could put in your Metcons. So I just used that and put them in there. So
makes a lot of sense. No, absolutely. Yeah. And just to touch on it once again, in regards to when we purchased our weightlifting shoes in the past, I also do remember that these were the only options that you had available, and also that I needed to find even a store that sells weightlifting shoes. And I needed to go with kind of a very, very small niche one, kind of a small weightlifting, like Olympic weightlifting shop somewhere in the south of Germany, because there was no other place where you were able to get some weightlifting shoes. And I think that I was even looking into Nike Romaleos and I couldn't find them, because I do remember that there was Nike Romaleos too, and I wanted to have them in the wine red kind of color.
Oh, that one.
And you couldn't get them in Germany back then. That's how far we came. So
I know the different colors that they came in, because I think, like that's part of the appeal, is like the cool colors that now the shoes come in. Although I think I'd probably be similar to you and just go for like just the complete black.
Now I just went with the black because I was just like,
they stay clean.
I'm not even, exactly. I'm not even bothering anymore with that. They just need to do one job, and that is do a proper job as a weightlifting shoes. And I can't really go too much into depth about kind of the review of weightlifting shoes, because the only ones that I've tried, like Romaleos 2, the AdiPower, and also now these. And there's probably quite a huge difference now due to the age of those kind of pairs. But what I can say is that, once again, a lot of thinking has gotten into those shoes, because the fabric is a little bit stiffer as well, so that you can't really, if you put a lot of pressure on the front side of the shoe when you're kind of being pushed to your toes, that it doesn't really give in, for example. Also, what has been thought about is kind of the inlays. They are also kind of stiffened up as well, so that you're not having too soft of an inlay as well. And by that, kind of still having an unstable underground, even though that the sole itself is kind of stable.
I don't know if the Addy Powers came with it, but I don't even know if I've still got them, but the Romaleo 2s had like meat day inlays, which were just like rock solid ones. And then they had like trainee inlays, which are like soft ones. But I've never even used the meat. Maybe I used the meat day ones once because I did one powerlifting meet, but I don't even know if I still have them. If they're probably at home in my bedroom in a drawer somewhere.
But yeah, once again, I think it was absolutely worth it to get them, especially now with 30% off. It was just a no-brainer to me that now's the time to replace the AdiPower, even though that I could have used them a little bit longer. I could have easily also fixed that one part that has given me issues, because I couldn't really strap it hard around anymore. That was the only thing that was kind of off with the old ones, but it would have probably still cost like, I don't know, $30 to fix it. I was just like, man, come on, let's get some new ones.
Yeah, I think I only ever tried a pair from Strength Shop because they were cheaper. And it was like their own brand ones. And for whatever reason, those just weren't good. So I can see even price points making a difference. So it makes sense that like a decade on, they're going to have improved the technology there enough to feel that difference.
Yeah. No, let's take a short break and then we are back with a little bit more.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
Back again. I think that the shoe talk is over now. Steve, you're now probably a little bit hungry for some new shoes, but I think that the Nike Romaleos, they have done a fantastic job and they probably still will do a fantastic job moving forward as well. And speaking about then the Metabolite block, I don't know, weren't you planning on doing a little bit of Metabolite start of training yourself as well?
Yes, so I have introduced I think every session has some Metabolite techniques in there. But yeah, so I have a few, like I kind of view them as like tricks up the sleeve and just like an easy way to get like volume and stimulus in that isn't super fatiguing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wanted to elaborate a little bit on my realizations for then the Metabolite stuff. And perhaps I would like to know your kind of take on that as well, your observations and also your experience yourself. So first off, I've realized that Metabolite techniques or intensity techniques for me, for the back, don't work for me personally. I'm someone who realized over the years that I'm better suited of doing back work in the 6 to 15-ish rep range. Everything above that doesn't really feel right, for me at least. Everything below that feels like shit as well, where I'm just using other body parts. And in very rare cases, I'm going to that 6 repetition mark. Either it's kind of the last set or kind of the last sets of an exercise where then the fatigue has kicked in so much that it takes me to that lower threshold. Or it's an exercise where it's more like chest supported and I can really just like focus and hold on to something else while then doing the movement in a unilateral fashion. But for me personally, I find it is way more productive if we just want to kind of compress it a little bit more, so to be in the 8 to 12 repetition range as the sweet spot, and then be around that, of course, with the first and the last set of an exercise. And using then intensity techniques such as rest pauses, mild matches, something like this doesn't really give me a lot for the back.
I just came to I haven't thought about it this way before, but it's almost, and I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, muscle groups that don't tend to get a great pump don't do well with Metabolite techniques, like in general. So the ones that immediately come to mind for me is like, I don't know if it's the same for you, but back for sure, same as you. I've tried like doing lat prayers into a lat pull down. It just doesn't really get me much, or like higher rep, like lat prayers and things like this, or higher rep lat pull downs. Like you said, I end up like the grip starts with the, it just doesn't feel it in the back anymore. And there is that sweet spot for it. And similar with like hamstrings for me, like 100%. Metabolite techniques for hamstrings, it just feels like completely off.
100%, Steve. Honestly, it's the same for me, and that is something that I wanted to touch on as well. So I'm not doing any kind of intensity techniques with lat curls or so, even though it would be kind of suited for it if you really think about it. But at the same time, I've never really felt that it gives me what it is that I was desiring in it. Kind of, maybe it's like you said, those muscle groups and also exercises that don't really cause a significant pump. I feel like going too high in a repetition range or using those intensity techniques simply doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about it, but it just, and particularly like, I don't know, for me at least with leg curls, it was crazy the other day. it'll be tomorrow I do it. Lying leg curls, like if I do a high rep range on that, so I think I did like 20 reps. That in itself is just, I don't know what it is. It's super laborious. Like I didn't enjoy it actually going that high in reps. It just feels like it's taking forever on that movement. Yeah. And then my next set, I think I literally got like 12. Like just huge rep drop-offs on like leg curl variants in general, especially first set to second set. I don't know if that plays into it as well, but doing like a myo match on lying leg curls for me, imagine like I'd have to go 20, no, I try and myo match 20, so I'd be 12, and then I'd probably get like 3, and then I'd have to do 3, and then like I've already then done so many sets to do a myo match, like it just becomes, and then if I did 3 of those, it would be ridiculous. So I just find it doesn't really work super well for that.
You bring up another great point that I wanted to touch on, and that is, and I can't really, I'm not entirely certain why that is so far, whether it has to do with training experience or whether it has to do with maybe motor unit recruitment, because I could possibly see that it would also be the same for people who are very muscular as well, that when you have an exercise that works particularly well for you, even there, something like rest pauses, intensity techniques, myo matches don't really work that well. So what I'm referring to is, for example, the bicep curls. For me personally, and we've touched on it in the past already, I don't need more than 3 sets, and I'm fried on then curls, no matter what variation I'm doing. And I can already see on normal, straight, static sets that my performance is dropping so significantly on a set per set basis that if I'm using now rest pauses or myo matches, it just goes to the shitter. Whereas like I'm doing the first set up to 20 repetitions, and then the second set is 5 repetitions, and I already am fighting hard for it, where it doesn't really feel productive anymore. And also the pumps aren't even better with an intensity technique as they are with just normal sets.
Yeah, I think that makes sense in my experience as well. I don't know if it will be the same. Other people might not experience it for the same muscles. Maybe it's even different person to person for different muscle groups. But again, when I think about where Metabolite techniques work best, they're for the muscles that like the chest, the quads, like they tend to get like crazy pumps. But you mentioned actually intensity techniques not working super well on certain exercises. I don't know, I haven't tried it very often, but trying to do like a myo match on like a leg press, I've tried it once and I was just like, I can't do it. Like my quads are just going to completely give in.
On that note then, Steve, because I know that you're also very good at now listening to what your body has to tell you, and also due to your training experience, do you think that it has something to do with training experience and being able to push to a very close to failure, muscular failure with that first set? And if you're then trying to recruit the same motor units without proper rest, that you simply can't perform well, and that it would then better to rest longer so that you have a little bit better and more of a recruitment of those fast twitch muscle fibers?
Yeah, I think especially when you see like steep rep drop-offs, I am assuming that's because you've done a really good job at fatiguing the muscle that you're trying to target. And I think when you are less experienced, you, like you said, you probably can't truly take that muscle to like its like failure point or whatever. So your reps in reserve are actually technically a bit further away from failure than what they technically are if you could fully recruit the whole entire like muscle group to take it fully there. And so you need less because you're just more efficient at working that whole muscle. I'd love to think of a good analogy for that, but I think that makes a lot of sense. So for me in the past, like I could probably do a lot of sets of leg press. Actually, when I look at my Facebook memories every day, and sometimes I see like old lifting videos, and I think it was like my last set, it's like my 5th set or 6th set of leg press. And like I actually did push hard. Like I watched the set and I was like, clearly I was pushing myself hard, but what clearly wasn't fatiguing the quads a whole lot. Whereas like if I was to do 5 sets of leg press, man, I'd be just completely destroyed. I'd definitely have to do down sets because the rep drop off would be so steep. I'd be in like less than 5 repetitions very soon. So I think you're completely right. When you it's not just a case of people get stronger, and so that causes more fatigue and more stimulus. I think it's also a case of they're just better at actually taking that muscle group fully towards its like individual failure point. because I don't know, just experience earns you the ability to be able to do that, like you said, motor unit recruitment and things.
Yeah, no, also in my head it makes a lot of sense, but once again, only because in my head it makes a lot of sense doesn't mean that it's actually true and what is going on. But theoretically speaking, in my opinion, this is what I've hypothesized since a long time, and I actually wanted to ask a couple of researchers about that. And I've been thinking about it under the shower after one of the sessions as well, because it's something that I've talked about in the past already. When it comes to training experience and motor unit recruitment, that is a neurological trait or skill rather that needs time to develop, and the more time you have under the bar, the better it is to then engage those motor units. And with some people who are then having a better predisposition of having the ability to engage a lot of motor units already from at an early age maybe, or early training experience, and that's why they are seeing a more rapid growth in the early stages of their lifting career, whereas some people first need to develop that skill, that motor pattern skill. And we see it in other fields as well, right? Some people pick up a ball and are very good at dribbling and all that kind of stuff, right? It just comes natural because some of the motor units and neurological pathways are already maybe there, right? And some really need to train hard and practice hard. Same goes with other skills, such as playing an instrument or so. Some people, it's very easy because they have the coordinative skills already. For some, they really need to practice for a long time. And I just think that maybe there's still something to it, and I would be very curious to hear whether behind this hypothesis, and I don't know whether there are some research or is some research around this, and I don't even know how to test it because it would be such a longitudinal study that I don't even know whether it's possible to test something like this.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me think of the podcast that I did with Cliff, and where I brought up what James Hoffman calls like motor morons.
Yeah.
Where these individuals who just can't seem to like do the technique, and like they hit technical failure way before muscular failure.
Steve. And that is what sparked once again that thought, because he was talking about high repetition work for less skilled and experienced individuals to build that neurological efficiency kind of. But I think feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, I think you see this with like people, and you hear this from coaches all the time, like people who are previously athletes then come into like bodybuilding work and they know how to move their body. Whereas when you have someone who doesn't have a sporting background, also untrained, they don't know what a hip hinge is. They can't like do any of these things. So I definitely think, and I also have spoken about this, and I've heard other people talk about it too, where you see your mirror muscles, like the quads, the chest, like they're quite easy to train and like get right initially. Whereas the back, that for a lot of people takes more time. It's more complex. You also can't see it when you're training it in the same way. And so like that one, sometimes it's lagging and then it explodes later in your career maybe. Or you hear people who have like crazy backs and they've just never struggled with like flexing it and like hitting like a front. I said this to Cliff, like when I tried to do a front relaxed the first time, I was like, how does anyone ever do a front relaxed? I can't flare my lats at all. And then now it's like super easy. The back's grown a bunch since then. So I think there's got to be something there, like you said.
Yeah. And I think that this is why repetitions are so important, of like also time under the bar, to build that neurological pathway. And once again, I could be completely wrong in that way of thinking, but it's something that has been on my mind since years already, because in so many ways, and if I address it from many different angles, it just makes sense to me. But once again, also there, only because it makes sense in my head doesn't mean that this is actually what's going on and that is the truth. But yeah, it's just, I want to actually then ask some more knowledgeable people about their take on the matter and whether they know and could perhaps even test it in some future research, or whether it's impossible for the time being of being able to test something like this.
Yeah, it's interesting, like absolutely, because I think my bias is I look back at what my previous training was and how high in volume I was going, and my bias was I clearly wasn't training close enough to failure, and maybe truly muscular failure I wasn't, but maybe I wasn't able to, and that's why I could do that extra volume, and maybe I needed to do that extra volume to get the motor skills to be able to get to where I am now, where I'm way more efficient at actually taking a muscle group to that point. So it's got way more fatigue, way more stimulus, and I need way less. So maybe it wasn't the fact that I wasn't able to train. Like it kind of is the same thing. I wasn't able to train to muscular failure, but I was in terms of technical and my ability at the time, but it just didn't relay to the motor control for that specific muscle, which relays to the podcast that I just recorded with Jake that you'll soon listen to if you haven't already, where we're talking about there is no trainability in terms of using RAR. Like someone who has no training experience was just as good basically as someone with years of training experience. And I kind of had posited the question of like, yeah, but are these people failing? They're not hitting muscular failure maybe, but maybe that doesn't matter because it still transitions to the RAR model. So yeah, anyway, just I think very much it confirms your thoughts.
Yeah, and I very much like that thought process, to be honest. And it would also then co-align with the ability to get a pump. Because some people have a very, very hard time getting a pump, and it is also, once again, they don't know what it feels like and what it looks like, kind of, right? Internally speaking. And that's why it's hard then to replicate, and finding that is the first journey. And maybe there's then a correlation between the two of you don't have the neurological pathways and a capability of actually then experiencing something like the pump. Because even though you're training hard, you're never getting to the point where the muscle is or has the capacity of getting that cell swelling going. And it's more of a practice time component for the vast majority of people. And then there are people who are just naturally already a little bit more muscular, who are then getting under the bar. And for them, it comes more easily because the body may have already more motor units that it has kind of for that task, at least also there. Of course, in the end, it doesn't really make any kind of difference to you, the listener, right? You're training anyway. You're probably developing those skills anyway. And there's no need to think about it in the session or so, or to overthink it anyway, because you can't change it. It's once again just falling back to spending enough time in the gym and practicing.
I think the thing, if I was to take a practical take home from it, at least from this chat, I'd be like, and we say it all the time, like, don't just select a level of training volume or do a training protocol because you see someone say it is the way you're meant to do it. If you experience something differently, listen to your own feedback. So if you feel like, I don't know, someone's posting, they're like, oh man, it doesn't make any sense for someone to do more than 15 sets for their back or something, and you're like, oh man, I'm consistently doing above 15 sets, but if I do less than that, I don't really feel like anything's going on. Like I don't feel like I really had much of a hard workout or anything. Maybe you do need to do, because of the lack of ability to train towards muscular failure, you need to make up for it with volume. And if you didn't do that, you just wouldn't grow as well. That maybe comes back to, I'm just like drawing lines. James Krieger's spoken about like hard gainers and like people at that extreme, and they seem to do better with like higher volume than you'd think they'd need. And maybe it's just because like they're those motor morons who really just they get, maybe they think they're training to failure, but they're actually at like a 4 RAR for that muscle, so they need to do double the sets as someone who is like a genetically like made to be athlete who can do like 1 set and they've fried that muscle group.
And then it falls back to the question of like, okay, so how do I figure out whether I'm one of the motor morons or not? And I very much like Cliff's approach. And to the listeners now, this episode will come out very soon. And it really made me think. Honestly, it really made me think about my own approach and also the approach with my athletes. So I don't really have any kind of issues anymore with getting a pump anymore. But there was definitely a time. So I know that a lot of my athletes, or not a lot of my athletes, but of course, a handful of athletes and people that every now and then come to you to work with you, they have issues with the pump, and they are not really reporting the pump, or maybe have a harder time feeling the exercise. And I think this is definitely something that I'm going to implement and work with, is a very high repetition range. And while I was a little bit negative towards everything above 20 repetitions, in that scenario, I think I should be open for the suggestion of increasing the repetitions, maybe even a lot, right? By a lot. And then just pushing it to failure as best as the person can. Because especially on lifts such as the weighted cable crunches, this is one of those exercises that so many people butcher. So many people don't have a clue on how to execute the weighted cable crunches. And often it is because they may be morons for that exercise. And this sounds like a negative connotation, I know that. But they simply don't know how to move with that exercise. And also often it's also a combination then with going too heavy, because they think they have to. It still feels easy, right? Pushing it down because everything comes out of the hips. And it still feels easy, so I need to go heavier, right? And often it's the opposite thing that you need to be doing. And in that you're then aiming for a higher repetition range. Should be easier because you need to lower the weight to start with. Should be theoretically easier to really properly round in the low back, engage the abs, and by that, maybe build that neurological pattern and the movement pattern for then future heavier loads.
I agree with the practical application. I'm just thinking about doing it in practice and how much I'd hate it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to be your client. I already hate ab training enough. But that brings me to and I thought as well, where like my abs, I don't know about you, Pascal, but and both of us we've not been blessed with fantastic ab development.
No.
To get like people talk about like their abs cramping and getting like good ab like pumps and having issues with like cramping abs. And my abs have never cramped. I've had the mildest pumps in my abs. Like they're hard. And I feel like when I end up trying to do more, or I don't know, do something to try and elicit more of that stimulus, again, it's easy for it to dissipate to other areas and for me to just feel like I'm just doing junk volume. I don't know if you have, I'm at the moment doing, I think 2 like ab intensity techniques, basically finish like my straight sets and then go straight into like just crunches to like failure basically, or like V-ups to failure. And like I finish it and I'm like, yeah, I got a bit of a like ab pump, but I just kind of feel tired. And man, the abs are just, they're frustrating.
For me personally, a lot has happened for ab exercises, to be honest.
Awesome.
A lot. And I do now know what it's like to actually have ab pumps and also cramps. But it took a long time to get there. And it's like I just described about, for example, the weighted cable crunches. In the past, I was using the entire stack, right? Never felt a shit. I felt tired, but never really where I was supposed to feel it. And now I'm at a point where I work my way up again in terms of then the weight that I'm using, but I can really feel it. But I have to say, this is one of the very few exercises where I sometimes even have to go up to 22, 23 repetitions in order to really feel it and not lose the connection. And there are exercises, I think, where it's more important to focus on the mind-muscle connection in comparison to others. Because it's so easy to then let other muscle groups and body parts take over. And the mind-muscle connection is only your confirmation that you're still on it instead of kind of something else taking over. It's not so much important that is a crucial part for hypertrophy. It's more like, once again, you are getting the confirmation, like, I don't know, as if it's a dart and you're blind and you're throwing and there's always a buzzing sound, for example, right? And when you're outside, there's no sound. But when you're throwing it, all of a sudden, there's a buzzing sound. All right, I know that this is how I should throw it all the time, right? And it's kind of the same there as well. It's not necessary or mandatory for hypertrophy, but it's, I think, a good confirmation that you're always hitting each and every single rep where you are supposed to hit it. And that in conjunction with doing it on a weekly, monthly basis now, mesocycle after mesocycle, and also incorporating abs 4 times per week has done a lot. Once again, it falls back to what it is that we've talked about the entire podcast here, repetitive work. A lot of hours and repetitions have gotten into my ab training. And that's why I think I'm at a point now where I'm capable of training my abs appropriately.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've had a similar experience, but with my calves, where I even struggled. My left calf is bigger than my right by a small amount, and I struggled to contract even my right calf. Like I can sit here and contract it now, whereas in the past I couldn't even do that. So I was like a motor moron for that right calf. Whereas now, since like prioritizing them, putting lots of work through them, like I get tension and pumps, even like a little bit of soreness now and then through my calves. And that's pretty tough for me to be able to do. And I think hopefully they will start growing. I feel visually like they are, because when you get a pump, they look bigger and everything. And I'm like, and sometimes I look at them and I'm like, oh, I actually look maybe like I have trained them a little bit. But I'm looking forward to transitioning. I think I'm going to start, I do this now and then I kind of swap my emphasis from calves to abs, because I don't mind training calves now too much. Like that's actually all right, especially now I feel like something's happening, whereas before, like I hated it. Whereas hopefully I can get the same with abs. And you mentioned going above 20 reps, and that might be something I try to just go there, because I think especially when you go heavy with abs, it's so easy for other muscle groups to kick in. Yep. Your hip flexors are a strong muscle group. Like it's very easy for those to kick in. And especially like so many people do like I did it for the longest time, like decline crunches. Whenever I see someone using like considerable weight doing a decline crunch, I know they're just training their hip flexors, because when you train your abs, like you cannot do much weight with those. And that's where people get in their own head, where they're like, oh, I need to do more weight because that's progressive overload. If I'm not using any weight, it's a problem. But if you reduce the weight, you feel it more in the muscle, you're hitting the actual where you're trying to target. So I think again, for abs, where it's so easy to allow other muscle groups to come in, the recommendation of having and feeling the contraction is a good one, especially for people that struggle.
Yeah. And on that note, because we're coming up on time, so for example, for me, the chest, is kind of a weaker body part for me. And I, for a long time, had an issue of like contracting, like doing the titty dance. Yes. Right? Like having full control over then the pecs. And of course, when you're doing pressing though, you can be quite strong, where then other body parts are taking over. Do you think in a scenario of what it is that we've discussed now, it would be a wise decision of first and foremost doing an exercise of pre-exhaust exercise where you're feeding and targeting the chest muscles more and then move over to a pressing movement? And also secondarily, reduce the load, even though that you could press more, so that you're capable of focusing from a mind-muscle connection a little bit more on the chest?
I think both are good recommendations. I've done the former regularly with people who struggle with their chest, like pre-fatiguing it via a fly or something where they can really feel it out. And I think that makes a ton of practical sense moving into the secondary movement. And then, especially based off the discussion with Cliff, trying that higher rep range, allowing you to concentrate on really targeting and focusing on using the chest and not letting your triceps maybe take over or what have you. I think both of those suggestions make a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great discussion, Steve.
Yeah.
Honestly, transition from dog poop, dog vomiting, and all that kind of stuff to pumps and other considerations. I like that.
And again, you'll like this discussion with Jake because he's doing a really exciting dissertation. The podcast will take a while to come out, but I'll give you some hints. But he's basically doing his dissertation on using those proxies that we talk about to auto-regulate training volume versus straight sets. And it's an in-person, like I forget what it's called, but like it's within the same person, so that within subject design. So they're doing one arm is auto-regulated, the other arm is just straight sets, so static sets, sorry. And so I'm excited to see the outcome of that, because I think a lot of what we talked about here, with an understanding of how to auto-regulate your training, you can kind of guide yourself to the point where you want to be, where you're not doing junk volume, but you're not way underdoing it in terms of volume as well.
That's very interesting. And I think that there are a couple of researchers right now working on stuff that is very interesting, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, Milo and Pac, they're working on very interesting things. Zach and Jake are working on very interesting things as well. Great place and great time to be alive once again.
Yeah. I was talking to them. It's like, we were like a few years ahead of them. I was like, how old are you, Jake? He's like, almost 30. I think if we took like 4 or 5 years off us and we discovered what we did in our passion for bodybuilding and powerlifting and the people with PhDs like Lane Norton, maybe we would have gone into the same like science, like actually became more educated in that field, whereas we were a bit behind it. So anyway, it's super interesting, and it's really cool to see those guys come up and be able to chat to them about it, especially because now they're even researching like what some, like for example, it's kind of came from RP with these kind of algorithmic ways of managing volume. So it's great to see that they're even starting to like study that, not just like what the bros were doing. Now it's like, what are the evidence-based people taking from the research to apply to things? So it's really, really cool. But yeah, this was a great chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we have anything else? Just as a reminder, I guess, we have the kind of London seminar. It's not a seminar. It's 2 days in a training camp, basically. It's basically a training camp with the RP guys. I know Pascal's sold it very, very well previously in terms of just the value that you're going to get from people like Jared Feather, for example, working with IFBB pros. Like he's like a friend of Nick Walker, for example, the insights that you'll get from someone like that. Obviously, everyone knows Mike Israetel, incredibly smart individual, and be able to be like hands-on with him. Nick Shaw's going to be there, the CEO, so lots of invaluable insights from him. And then obviously you've got myself and Pascal, who you're definitely going to want to give a hug. So we look forward to seeing as many people there. We've still got tickets available. Still a few left, I think, for the mastermind. That will go very quickly. And that one is probably the best value out of them all, to be honest, but considerably pricey. So I can understand that.
And don't worry, guys, because I've heard that I shouldn't be in the fitness industry. I'm just organizing things in the background. The other guys will take care of them, the guidance of training and all that kind of stuff. So don't worry, you can still talk to me, but nothing to do with fitness. So I'm just the organizer.
I'd be incredibly surprised, in some ways maybe not surprised, if the person that made that comment is still listening at this stage of the podcast.
Yes, because he was also commenting on your hair and receding and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, was it the same person?
Yeah.
God's sake.
A very, very kind person, obviously.
Oh, dear. And with that, guys, we'll catch you in the next one.
Cheers, buddy.
Thank you for the support. We appreciate every comment.
We do.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality and we know how to do it. And we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.